Good day. It is Wednesday, March 6th, 2024. I'm recording this in Portland, Oregon. And very grateful to be in this moment. A few weeks ago, I had recorded a video regarding some health challenges. And I'm pleased to share that things have been developing very well in terms of healing. And I may share more about that in another video. This is the first recording I've done since surgery. And so I'm present to some general tiredness as my body continues to recover. But I'm back home now. And I'm in the space where I practice, you could say my home practice space, where I particularly engage in the focused practice of ally work in the mode and form that Raff describes of written dialogue. And so, as I'm recovering my strength and even just the capacity to sit in the upright sitting posture, the Buddhist form that I learned decades ago, today I sat down and opened the door of ally practice once again in this formal sense. And I wanted to share with you some insights that arose as I opened that door. In part, this is a response to questions that people have about the practice of ally work. I am particularly thinking of a question that was asked of me about what is the nature of the ally? What is the ally? How is the ally distinguished from other allies, as they put it? How is the ally, as we speak of it in the practice of ally work, different from other allies? Also, what prompts me to share this reflection is in response to the way that Dr. John Vervaeke at the University of Toronto has been sharing more publicly about his personal experience of the practice of ally work. And I really commend, and deeply appreciate that he is having that willingness and vulnerability to do that. From my point of view, we should consider ourselves very grateful to him because he is such an adept cognitive scientist and such an experienced contemplative that when someone with such a rigorous mind is sharing their own personal experience of the practice, we should respond with gratitude. And what I see to some degree in some of the YouTube comments, people just completely misunderstanding him and projecting their own biases and lack of knowledge onto him. So this is another place where I want to share my reflections to help clarify a understanding of what we mean by this practice of ally work, what we mean by connecting with the ally. So this reflection is a completely personal reflection. I'm not sharing this as an attempt to have a definitive understanding of ally work. I just want to share what came up for me today. So think of this as like my offering of breadcrumbs or pointers around how we may understand this practice. So first of all, as I opened up the practice, sitting with an inquiry of what is this practice of ally work, the first phrase that arose was presence-based inner dialogical mode. Presence-based inner dialogical mode. This is one way I languaged a description of the practice of ally work. Presence-based inner dialogical mode. So if we think about the way we function in the world as being in different modes, we might say a psychological mode or a narrative mode or an interpersonal mode. We could call this practice of ally work a presence-based inner dialogical mode. I really like this foundation of presence-based. And I think this is part of where there is such an errant reaction to John Vervaeke, because it is my belief and my projection that those who are responding to him critically may not even have the developmental training and capacity of having developed their own presence-based mode of being. They're coming from a very thought-based reactive mode, may not have even developed their own foundational level of contemplative practice, of presence-based practice. And as the great Persian mystic Suhrawardi said, there are two modes of knowing. There's knowing by presence and there's knowing by description. And I feel like these critiques are coming from just a misguided analytical descriptive attempt to categorize what Vervaeke is doing and just foundationally missing the mark. And so this knowing by presence, if we don't have that basic foundation of what it means to know by presence, then we're just going to be stuck in our heads, to put it simply, and projecting our own limited, veiled perceptions onto other people. Presence-based inner dialogical mode. Presence-based, you'll have to interpret that or feel that for yourself. What is presence-based? This is when we come into our embodied being. You don't have to have decades of contemplative practice to touch into this being present, but it helps. It helps to make it familiarized. It helps to make it a home base, as neuroscientists might say, a state rather than a trait that we can access. Presence-based inner dialogical mode. Now this is how this phrase languaged itself to me. It included the word inner, and as I settled into this mode of presence, this word inner came up as a contrast to, let's say, my more ordinary goings about my life, my day-to-day, going to the shops, getting a haircut, getting something out of the fridge. I wouldn't normally describe those things as being inner things. So when I sit down, I enter into the practice. This word inner comes up as a way to distinguish the way my attention is being oriented from these more ordinary ways of being. Now, what I will say is that label of inner is I would call it a contingent label. It's not an ultimate truth, because what also came up for me as I reflected on the way that this practice is engaging with what we call the imaginal. The imaginal is not defined by inner or outer. It's not categorized by inner or outer. So, presence-based inner dialogical mode. There's at first that sense of it being inner, but once that sense of innerness is integrated, then we can let go of that word, because we're not defining ourselves or engaging in a way that is limited by being inner or outer. Okay, so we've got the present space, we've got the inner, the dialogical mode. I've talked about this plenty enough in other videos, but this practice of ally work is a dialogical practice, and so we are entering into that dialogic mode. And if you're interested in the cognitive science perspective on the power and the meaning of the dialogic, just check out more of Dr. John Vervaeke's work. Check out his conversation with Dr. Charles Stang from Harvard. I won't spend time on the dialogical here because I've gone over it plenty of times. So that was the first phrase that came up. Presence-based inner dialogical mode, as a way to describe the direct experience, my direct experience of the practice of ally work. Second phrase that came up. This is the second phrase that came up. The reference base is the person's being. The reference base is the person's being. What does that mean? What does that mean? In this practice of ally work, in this presence-based inner dialogical mode, what are we referring to as, in terms of presencing the content of our experience in the practice? What is our reference point? Is our reference point a book? No, I'm not picking up a book in the moment that I'm sitting down to engage in this inner dialogical practice. Is my reference point my memory? Not necessarily. My memory may come into it. Is my reference point some other expert? Is it what wise person A said? Is it wise person B said? Not primarily. That again may come in through thought and memory. But the foundational reference base is the person's being. So it's you, it's me. You could say we are the practice field. Our bodies, our spiritual beings, however superficially or deeply we might describe the different layers of our being. The reference base is the person's being. And this is really, really powerful and really, really beautiful. Because what we're saying is, in the practice of ally work, we are like a reference base or an encyclopedia, so to speak, we are something more than we customarily believe that we can engage with to access insights, knowledge, guidance from this reference base, not from outside it. Now, if we want to get detailed, well, then we can, say that, well, what is a person's being? I don't mean a person's being is limited to the human form even. We could say ultimately a person's being is based in the divine. So we're not limiting the reference base to the physical form or any one layer of this person's being. But it is a living being. This is not, we don't have to seek outside ourselves to connect with a very rich reference base. So, 1, presence-based inner dialogical mode. 2, the reference base is the person's being. 3. This is the phrase that came up. 3. The inquiry is with the essence of the person's being. The inquiry is with the essence of the person's being. So we've got this dialogical mode. What are we in dialogue with? This phrase is pointing to the words, the essence of the person's being. Is this a way we could describe the ally? Is this one way to describe the ally? The essence of the person's being? I'm not defining the ally in this way. I'm just asking, is this a way we could have a provisional or one angle on describing the ally, one viewpoint through language? What's really important to me about this is for all those people who are critiquing John Vervaeke and misunderstanding what he is sharing, or for the question about what is the ally, is it this kind of being? Is it that kind of being? Is it what Jung talked about as the golden shadow? Is it, if it's not that, what is it? There are all these ideas or descriptions of different kinds of beings or presences when we go into very large cross-cultural conversations about spirituality. What are we connecting to for guidance or for inspiration? There's something very specific I'm pointing to here about the ally with this phrase. The inquiry is with the essence of the person's being. If let's say I was in a particular religious tradition and there was a saint in that tradition that I felt a close connection to and maybe I prayed to, well, we can see how there's something there that is different than a description of the essence of the person's being. Right? There's something about this word, essence, essential to a person's being. Even in the prior line I said about the reference base is the person's being. So the reference base isn't a spiritual being that has its existence outside of us. So I really invite you to sit with this, to hold it as an inquiry, a question, like as they say in Zen, a koan. We're not seeking definitive categorizations here. We're just engaging in pointers. Your direct experience is where you will find the pointers that are perhaps most meaningful to you if you're exploring this practice. I'll say a little bit more just to dance around this inquiry, this exploration of what is the ally. Now, I'm not going to remember this correctly because it's probably been a few months, 6 months since I came across this passage in Ibn Arabi, but there's a passage in the Futuhat al-Makkiyah, his big epic work. Ibn Arabi, of course, the great 13th century Islamic sage from Spain. He is sharing about spiritual knowledge and knowledge of the spiritual domain. If we were to say that Ibn Arabi's ally was the figure he referred to as the youth, which transmitted this epic work, the Futuhat, to him, if we were to say that the youth functions as Ibn Arabi's ally, and if we were to note that Ibn Arabi describes the youth as spirit taking on a form, then a little later in that book, he unpacks like what it is that we know or can't know about this spirit which takes on form. So here's what he says. Now, this is going off my memory, so I may not have all of these exactly corresponding to what he wrote, but it's close enough. I'll see if I can find the passage and reference it, footnote it in the notes to this video. So he says, if we are to ask questions of this spirit being, if we are to ask, who is it? If we are to ask, what is it? If we are to ask, where is it? If we are to ask, I don't know if he says when, but if we are to ask, when is it or why is it? So these who, what, where, when, why type questions. He basically says these questions do not apply. He's basically saying you can't ask those questions because they're the wrong kind of questions to be asking if you're trying to know or understand your relationship to this spirit being. Remember, when we come back to that description by Surawardi of knowing by description, we can see how these who, what, where, when, why questions, they're attempting to describe or identify the ally, the spirit being. To identify, it's like when when those people who are butterfly collectors, they take a butterfly and they pin it in their display case. Yeah, you've got a visual of the butterfly, but you don't have the butterfly. It's not alive. It's not a living presence. It's not the meaning and the beauty. It's not the being. So how do we engage with, how do we know the ally? Well, it's through this presence-based inner dialogical mode, the reference base of our being, and we're orienting to something which can be described as an essentialness of our being. And we can't fit into categorizations, not even in or out. If I were to sit here right now and say, somebody says to me, when you connect with the ally, is the ally inside or outside you? That question has no meaning to me. What has meaning is to go into this presence-based dialogical mode. And if we want to feel our way into a context for that, again, we can bring in the word, the imaginal. As Ibn Arabi would describe the imaginal world, he would also call it the vast earth. So if we think of the earth that we are all aware of as we record or watch this video, the vast earth is something exponentially larger. You would say there are two earths. There's the earth and the vast earth. The earth we see and the earth we don't see. So we're opening up a very, very wide, large context in which this practice is taking place. Not limited to the psychological. There's some very interesting conversations to be had about internal family systems, a method of therapy. It's very valued and meaningful right now in the psychological world. But in this practice of ally work, we're not limited to the context, to the psychological context outlined by IFS, internal family systems. This is a very, very open, deep, contemplative context we're opening up. Orienting, inquiring towards the essence of the person's being. Maybe one more thing to say. Ibn Arabi describes different stations that we enter on the spiritual path. You could say a station is like a spiritual place or context. We may have different points on our spiritual journey or evolution, and we find ourselves in new stations along the way. Ibn Arabi also describes a station that is like a station without a station. So I don't want to suppose that I know what he means by that. But I will just put his words out there, a station without a station. And then I will bring in a phrase from my Zen training. In one sense, the goal of Zen practice is to become a man of no rank, or to remove the gendered quality of that phrase, a person of no rank. Right? A person without a rank, without a station. Because a person without a rank can flow or engage in any rank. They're not fixing themselves, identifying themselves, limiting themselves to any one particular rank or station, perhaps. So let's come back to where we started. This presence-based inner dialogical mode, but let's come back to that phrase, presence-based. Could what we are describing as presence, this being here, being present, could this presence be the place in which we are connecting with ourselves as the person of no rank, the person of no station? In our emptying out of ourselves, emptying ourselves of our limited identifications, emptying ourselves into presence, is this where we take on the qualities of presence, of no rank, of no station? And is that connected to what Ibn Arabi spoke of as humanity being created in the image of the divine, and the quality of humanity that distinguishes it is this capacity for a presence that is not particular or localized, but that is universal. Universal presence that synthesizes, unites, connects the different modes, presences, and stations that flow, that emanate, that engage in this world of being, of form, of spirit, of multiplicity. Is this presence, is this universal presence the foundation of the practice of ally work? Thank you for your interest, and sending my best wishes to you. Wishing you a very good day wherever you are.